I believe we can start now. So once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. My name is Michael Ofosu-Hinwise, and on behalf of WBCSD, I would like to welcome you to our webinar today on SOS 1.5. Just to give a little bit of context to the webinar, this is a webinar series, which is part of a broader series that WBCSD is hosting between the months of April and July. And this is in, due to the logical cancellation of some of our meetings, as many of you will know. Normally in April, we host our LD meeting in Montreal, but due to the coronavirus pandemic, we are happy to be able to switch directly to these virtual series where we share insights and provide members with insightful sessions throughout this period. So before I introduce the host for today, I'll go through a few housekeeping items, if I may. This session is being recorded and it will be shared with you shortly after the session. All of the participants are currently muted, and we encourage you to stay muted for the remainder of the sessions, unless, of course, you are speaking. We also encourage all of you to change your Zoom name to your actual name, your company, and location. And you can see here indicated on the slide. Just hover over your name, and then you can see 3 dots that will be able to allow you to change your name. We also encourage you to use the chat function to share questions, insights during the session. And there's also the raise your hand option for all of you who would want to flag to be prompted. We have a very interactive session planned for today. And everyone, if you could go to the next slide. One of the main tools that we'll be using for interactivity is Mentimeter. So to ensure that all of you are well set up for Mentimeter, I would please ask you to take out your smartphones, go to www.menti.com and use the code 474766. So we have a very informal icebreaker question for you today, which is, which room of your house is now your office? Of course, we know that many of us are working remotely, working from home. I personally am working from my bedroom, which is now translated into my office. So please, to set up for Mentimeter, kindly fill in the question, and then we will see how many reactions we have. I see we have about 78 people on the call, and the numbers are rising. There are a lot of people like me in their bedrooms, living room, study, office at home, kids' bedroom, that's interesting, the coffee table, my library. Interesting. Well, I hope that we are all staying safe, being at home, taking care of loved ones, colleagues. I see daughter's room, that's an interesting one as well. Somebody is tuning in from their stepfather's office. That's interesting. I see we have 44 people that have answered. We have 80 participants. So I would encourage you to please continue logging in. Go to www.menti.com and use the code 474766. 47 people. Well, I see some people are already putting their answers in the chat. Please use www.menti.com and use the code, and that will help you to contribute to a lot of the feedback sessions that we will be having later today. We have 49 people out of 84. I think, well, once we get to around 55, 60, we can move on. So we encourage you all to please sign in. This will make it easier for us when we get into the remainder of the session. Thank you very much. All right, I think we can move on to the next slide. With this, I would like to then introduce you to our host for today. We are happy to have with us Maria Mendeluce and Erwan Salta. Maria Mendeluce is Managing Director and a member of our senior management team, and Erwan is the Director for our Climate and Energy Program here at WBCSD. So Maria, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and welcome everybody to this very interesting webinar. I'm really impressed by the level of participation. So in total, for the 2 sessions today, we had 330 participants. And that shows that this topic is very relevant to all of you, even in this moment that we're living. So first of all, an antitrust reminder. So we need to avoid any discussion in any conversation of competitive, sensitive topics such as pricing, cost, with strategies, future capacity additions or reductions, customers, and output decisions. Today, in the agenda today, we are going to have a very interesting session where first we're going to, if you could move to the next slide, Michael, we're going to have a session in the plenary where we're going to present you the SOS 1.5 roadmap and key learnings and how SOS 1.5 will support you. Then we will break out in these 3 rooms, 15 minutes each, and you will be allocated automatically, and we will discuss 3 topics: how to accelerate your company individual climate journey, how to mobilize ecosystems so that you can accelerate your journey, and how can we improve and enrich global standards to facilitate the tracking and reporting on progress. And then we will finalize with a summary of the next steps. So, I hope you're all safe and your company is little by little coming to normal operations, if we can qualify anything normal these days. What we have all noticed, and it has been well documented in many articles these days, is that this pandemic has shown us the exponential nature of systemic risks. How a virus can have exponential impact across the world in a very globalized world. Well, climate change, as you all know, I'm sure I don't need to convince you, it's the biggest challenge that society faces. And the risks are as big or even more than the ones that we're facing today. So as we have been reflecting on this pandemic and the comparison to climate change, we realize that there are 3 things that are in common between the pandemic and the climate change fight that we're all fighting against. The first is that we need to listen to science, and science says in climate change that we need to be aligned with 1.5 net zero emissions by 2050 if we want to keep the world in a safe operating space. Hence the name of SOS 1.5 of this new program that we launched in January under the leadership of Erwan. The second thing is that we have underestimated the risks of this systemic change, as you have clearly seen in the stock markets, in the company's valuation, and in the P&L of many companies. And so we must avoid this. We need to introduce climate risk on our financial reporting following the Task Force on Climate Financial Disclosures. And my colleague Rodney and the team, Lois and Luke, are helping you do that. And thirdly, there are many solutions that exist today to fight against climate change that can also help us recover better. And hence there is this hashtag that has become very popular, which we started with our activities at Women Business, that is called Build Back Better. So we hope that through this webinar you are inspired. We hope that we can help you in your journey to be aligned with 1.5, and we hope that together we can build a more resilient future. So let me introduce the panel of speakers of today. So on the plenary, we're going to have 2 fundamental speakers, 2 people that have helped us a lot with their teams to advance on this journey. First, Michel Fredo, Senior Partner and MD, Global Lead of Climate and Environment of BCG. So Michel has helped us with his team develop the SOS 1.5 framework, but he's also helping many people advance in this activity from COP26, etc. And so we're very, very thankful for the help that BCG has provided us. Secondly, I would like to introduce to Karen Wesley. Karen Wesley, it's a power engine. She has helped us revitalize the Climate and Energy Program Board. We have a really interesting meeting with Harry Breckelmans, our chairman Jean-Pierre Clamadieu, and Karen James, the three chairs of the Climate and Energy Program Board. And he has mobilized Monica to help us better explain the narrative of climate and energy, and has provided fundamental input. So without ado, let's hear, on the breakouts, you will also hear from Aisu Katun, Global Director of Sustainability from Grave, Antonio Carrillo, Head of Climate and Energy at Lafarge Holcim, and Sophie Huguier, Sustainability Development Manager at Akina. So without further ado, Michelle, I hope, yes, the floor is yours. It's yours.
Thank you very much, Maria. Do you hear me well?
Very well.
Yeah, you hear me well?
Yes, very well, Michelle,
okay,
you can go ahead.
Thank you. So following what you said and what all of you and all of us are going through, there is a risk. There is a risk that climate is in fact the next victim of COVID. And this risk exists, and you remember from other crises that, of course, the world mobilized on health first, then social aspects, but then with the risk of deprioritizing climate. And as Winston Churchill says, never let a good crisis go to waste. And therefore, we really need to make sure, and as you said, Maria, to take the lessons from what happened to COVID on a crisis that is huge, that we know it's going to happen, climate, and therefore that we anticipate and that we make sure that we're doing the right things, and it is possible. The good news, it is possible. The first element I wanted to share with you is a very recent study that probably you've been exposed to, that was done in the UK, but interviewing by Ipsos, interviewing more than 20,000 people online from different countries. And the good news is that you see that there's a broad support from the large public at large, on the fact that the economic stimulus that is being put by all the countries on the table to protect the world should be channeled versus green investments. And it's not only 65. What pleased me as well, I must say, is that you see that China is 80%. You see that India is 81%. So it's, of course, the European countries are quite high, but China and India are even higher than the European. And therefore, there is a first force that starts to be appearing, which is the voters, us, together, that recognize that climate is a crisis, and is a crisis as important as COVID, maybe more, and that the stimulus should be channeled versus the green. Because you remember that in 2008, all the money that was poured in was not getting really into green investment, and in fact was not participating to the climate agenda. The second good news is, and that's a bit the next page, is that those stimulus can not only generate CO2 savings and the investment in green type of ventures, but also can create jobs. So we try to rank, you know, the different options and the different opportunities in our green agenda, and look at them, and you see that on the upper right, whether it's large-scale renewables that we know is a huge market that is still to be developed, whether it's industrial efficiency or building renovation, these are markets that can have a very positive impact on climate, and are generating a significant number of jobs. And you can go down the list where you can see that there has, you know, it's not only now, because these are investments that you can have now and will have repercussions and impact right away. And you can also invest for more longer term, like CCUS, green hydrogen, sustainable agriculture, and more longer term, even synthetic fuel. So there's a whole range of things and topics where you can invest that I know that most of you are already working on those aspects. And we need to make sure that, you know, governments in the money that they're going to put on the table are also helping us and you as companies to promote those investments. Now, when I look at the corporations and I look at, you know, the different levers to reduce emissions, the first point I wanted to make is, as you know, with the existing technology, you can reduce to, you know, 70 to 80% of emissions with the existing technologies. And if you look technology by technology, lever by lever, you see that on the left side of the cost curve, that there's a huge number of levers and activities that the company can do at its own perimeter that does reduce CO2 and doesn't cost much, or even could, you know, if you're starting developing green energy that you can even sell to your neighbors, to the factories around you, could also generate money. So there's a number of levers that can be implemented. Some of you have already implemented them, but not all, that you can put in place. And from the example of the COVID, there's a whole set of levers that you're going to put together as well to develop a resilient supply chain and make sure that you have closer type of supply chain closer to your market, which also will have a good impact on CO2. The last thing that I wanted to say is even on the investor side, because you were saying that, yes, on the investor side, there is more disclosure, but if you look at the recent numbers, the ESG type of investments have shown that they were much more resilient. And therefore, the cost of capital of companies that really do drive their climate agenda in the right way is going to be lower than the one that doesn't. So if you take all these together, I think we can be convinced that if we are proactive, because you need to be proactive to defend climate and the climate agenda in spite of the turmoil we're in, makes sense to get out of the crisis in a winning way versus climate. And I think SOS 1.5, at least that was the spirit, is a tool at your disposal to help you. Wherever you are on the climate journey, I think the objective and the aspiration was to help you to move from one level to another. If you're starting to intermediate, if you're a very good practitioner on climate already, to give you ideas to get to the next level. So we hope that you will find it useful, and I look forward for these discussions today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michel. Really interesting. I want to make aware the participants that we will have a session, I think it's June 8th, where we will discuss about the climate policy aspects and the stimulus packages. But I mean, we have all this in mind, Michel, when we think that, you know, that countries are going to spend trillions of dollars, which means that they will not be spending those in the next few years. And so the window of opportunity and influence is now. And we can influence that those investments go to clean technologies by also providing, from a business perspective, a credible set of plans that are aligned with those investments. And I have to say that we were quite impressed by many announcements by many companies these days in the middle of the crisis, when they say we're going to double down investments, etc. And more in particular, very impressed with the announcements by Shell about moving to be net zero. This, for a company like Shell, an oil and gas company, it's quite hot. And so we're really keen to hear from Karen you know, why SOS is important, why 1.5 is important, why Shell announced what they announced recently, and what did they announce, and how she thinks that the SOS can help us and can help companies like Shell and many others, because it's a framework that can be applied to any company, can help companies advance into that goal. So, Karen, are you unmuted? Very well. Thank you, Karen.
You well?
Yes, very well. Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Maria. I know that announcement was dear to your heart, given the years of debates we've had about the target of 2050 and Shell's aspirations. So we were really excited when Shell announced just a couple of weeks ago the ambition to be a net zero company by 2050 or sooner, showing that even at a time of immediate challenge, it's important to keep an eye on the long term. And for Shell, one of the longest term questions has always been, the long term question always has been climate change. So what that means is, if you show the next slide, we made a further announcement building on our net carbon footprint ambition, which is summarized in the slide after this one. Correct. You saw a quick slide on our disclosure, which I think we're all under antitrust, so just a reminder of that, of course, from Shell's perspective as well. Quickly on the net zero announcement, essentially what it represents is three things, but I wanted to actually talk more about the three things that it represents for the collaboration with WBCSD. There's plenty of information about the announcement online, and of course, if you have any questions about it specifically, come back to me. But essentially, Shell's ambition is to be a net zero emissions energy business by 2050 or sooner. That means, firstly, reaching net zero emissions on our own operations, continuing our net carbon footprint ambition, but accelerating it. And that is an ambition that's focused on our products, not on our operations. And then the third piece of it is the partnering for decarbonization of energy use. And that's the piece that I wanted to talk about in the context of WBCSD and SOS 1.5. Now, this is a deeply, deeply important piece because, as many of you know, from the energy, anyone in the energy sector knows that the production of energy creates about 20% of the emissions in the value chain based on energy, and about 80% of emissions come from the use of the products. So that's either you driving a car with a combustion engine, or a power plant, or a large industry user of fossil fuels. And that's why the net carbon footprint ambition really focuses on not just the production of the energy, which we'll also aspire to have net zero emissions from, but more importantly, the use of it, because that's where the lion's share of emissions come into play. And that's why the work with WBCSD is so important to us, and the work with SOS 1.5 in three ways. The first way is because WBCSD's membership and the members of the Climate and Energy Program represent members of the full value chain of supply and demand. So those who both produce, but also those who use energy. Ones who it'll be easier to decarbonize quickly, and the ones in the harder to abate sectors that will be harder to decarbonize. So working across those value chains is in our view, is the only way to decarbonize a society through the energy sector. The second really important piece is the work that WBCSD does on the greenhouse gas protocol, areas of policy, and the work with the natural climate solutions. And that is because carbon is a stock problem. There is just a significant amount in the atmosphere. If demand continues, even with the decline from COVID, we won't be able to continue the way we are without actually removing carbon from the atmosphere. That's why the role of trees is so important, and also the role of carbon capture and storage. That's the second element where WBCSD's program is so important to us. And then the third element is one we've been discussing actively with other parties as well, WBCSD, the World Economic Forum, is an approach to decarbonization, which we're calling Pathfinders, which really tries to form relationships and collaborations across the value chains that can work together collaboratively to decarbonize. Most of that work requires very significant government and very significant policy and financing foundations. So a few examples of those would be work going on with the International Maritime Organization and WWF on shipping, work that goes on with some of the parties around this call in the areas of CCS and clusters of CCS. So an example of that would be the Northern Lights project, where Equinor, Total, and Shell work with the Norwegian government to develop a system that captures CO2 from other industry, including cement, and then ships the CO2 to offshore fields for storage. These are examples of collaborations that go across industries, across society, and indeed very much with strong policy and finance enablers. So I'll leave it at that. We're really looking forward to collaborating further, developing more ideas and more pathfinders in implementation through the SOS 1.5. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Karen. Very helpful explanation, and I invite you all to deep dive into the documents that Shell has produced and has put available that explains how they're going to get to net zero and the challenges that we find there. So we continue with the presentation. So now we're going to talk to you about the SOS 1.5 roadmap and the key learnings. Next slide. So the new vision and mission of the Climate and Energy WBCSD work program is that companies achieve net zero emissions by 2050, aligned with the 1.5 scenarios. And we want to help accelerate the decarbonization of all sectors to get there. This mission was approved in Lisbon. Now, there is a follow-up because you will have probably seen in your inbox that WBCSD is introducing as a membership criteria that if you want to be a member of WBCSD, you need to commit publicly, you need to announce publicly that you have this goal to be net zero by 2050. And so in some ways, SOS 1.5, it's our mechanism to help you get there. And we want to help you we have developed a roadmap on what is the different steps that your company needs to make to be aligned with net zero. That goes from risk management, employees, strategies, communications, etc. And that I will explain to you later. But what has been quite impressive is that we have had a lot of interviews and we have learned a lot. And we have also heard from you that you want to learn from each other because you are facing similar challenges. And so this is a great space to learn, share best practice, and individually as a company develop your own carbon footprint to net zero. The second thing that we have heard is that you need help because we need to bring a consensus around how to report on Scope 3 emissions, what should be included, what should not. Should we include the carbon offset? If not, what is the role of NCS? And so on and so forth. And so, as you know, WBCSD, it's a partner of the World Resources Institute in the GHG protocol. So we hope we can engage with them and with the Science Based Targets Initiative through our involvement with the Women Business Coalition to make sure that we have the mechanism in place and the tracking mechanism in place that makes sense for business as well, and that you can use and that you have enough guidance. We have also done quite a lot of guidance on buildings, on utilities, and probably will do more in the future. And thirdly, as Karen mentioned, there is a strong appetite from some members to develop some, close collaborations across value chains on these pathfinders. We have seen this already on the built environment activities, and we will see more coming up. Next slide, please. So we have done more than 30 interviews across different sectors and across different geographies, including WBCSD companies, but also non-WBCSD companies. And we have also got some responses from an online survey that we sent earlier this year. So we really thank you for your engagement. We know that these things take a lot of time. We know that, with this pandemic, we're all at home, we have plenty of Zoom meetings, and we are very impressed and very thankful and grateful for your collaboration in providing your input, which have been input fundamental to develop the roadmap that we will explain in a minute. Next slide. So there are 3 learnings that we have found out. The first one, company mobilization is on the rise, yet there are major barriers that limit impact. The second one is that we have heard that the roadmap, SOS 1.5, provides a tool for companies to decarbonize the company to help you understand, what other people are doing. And also you will see, because we are doing a tool that for different levels, for the beginners, the ones that are in the middle of the journey and the ones that are best in class. So you can start the journey, but you can also grow in that journey to become best of class. And we hope that we can give you the tips on what is needed to be there. And then the third very important thing is that for many companies, the scope 3 emissions are very important. We just heard Shell, 85%. And so beyond individual action at company level, at the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, ecosystem collaboration is needed to accelerate. I was not this morning, but this afternoon, AB Inver, which is a new member of WBCSD, I met Virginia in New York just before the pandemic. Really interesting to hear the exercise that as a beverage company, they need to do upstream and downstream and collaborate. And so anyway, this is what we're trying to do. So I'm going to introduce you now Erwan Sauté. Erwan Sauté is the Director of Climate and Energy. He started in November, and it has been a steep learning curve, but I think that now, he's very solid and understands very well what you're going through in your journeys to 1.5, and he's going to walk you through the roadmap and through the rest of the webinar. So thanks a lot for your attention, and over to you, Erwan.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Maria, for your kind words. So yes, I will try to deliver on the expectations. So thank you very much all to be there. Indeed, I'm going to share with you slides what we have learned with BCG during the last 3 months while we were building this roadmap, but also doing the interview. And of course, much more will be shared to you in the coming weeks. We have a report that is going to be prepared and will be shared with you. We will be having webinars and workshops. But in a few slides, I'm going to indeed share these key learnings. But let's start with this graph that you all know that shows that today greenhouse gas emissions are still going up. And even with the pledges that have been made today by countries via the NDC, the curve is only flat. And you can see with this 2 green curve, the 2-degree pathway and the 1.5, where we need to be. So there is a big gap between where we are today and where we should be to deliver on this carbon decarbonizations. And today, the rate of decarbonization must be at 7%. So every year we need to deliver about a 7% reductions. And if we wait until 2025, this is going to be 15%. And just to put that in a perspective, you probably all have heard that the COVID-19 may deliver a 5% reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Of course, we don't want to have a COVID every year, but this is to show you the amplitude or the magnitude of the effort that we need to put in place to get this kind of reductions. So indeed, as Maria has started to explain to you, the roadmap that we have developed, and also based on the feedback that we collected from the interview, we are developing a 3-step approach. And we also know that actually today, most of the company, based on the CDP survey that was done recently with about 7,000 companies, that most of the company today are still at the beginning of the journey. So they need really to raise ambitions. They need to make the first commitment and start to define the decarbonization strategy. And then we have companies, much less, that are what we could say advanced. Usually they have already set science-based targets. They are doing greenhouse gas accounting and they are doing disclosure. And they are also very often developing low carbon products. And then we have very few, unfortunately, but very well advanced, best in class, that have indeed really understood the competitive advantage of moving into a low carbon economy. They have redefined the business model. So it's not anymore the business as usual, but they are really transforming this business model to live and to be successful in this low carbon economy. And they are really leading the industry decarbonization pathway. So that's a bit the 3 categories. And then, of course, there are a lot of barriers that we have learned during these interviews. And we are just putting here few of them. And we will, of course, share all with you in these upcoming webinars. These barriers on the policy, like the carbon price, the lack of a global carbon price to help companies indeed to compete, the lack of global reporting standards, On the market, there's still too limited demand for low carbon products. So we need to find a way to increase the demand for this type of products. On the technology, of course, the abatement technology, the cost is still too high, or some technology are not mature enough. So we need to make sure that we work also on that aspect. And if we look at the investor side, yes, today, most of them are still looking at short-term investment, and they need to go to mid-term and long-term investment. There are also internal barriers, difficulty to define the baseline, but also to address the scope 3. That was really coming again and again in all the interview. There was difficulties to define exactly the business case. I mean, for all the chief sustainability officer, they were telling us sometimes it's difficult to explain and to convince the board that we need to go there. So they need also to define concrete roadmap, and this is where we want also to help. And the big things that come back again and again was indeed the needs to mobilize the value chain or the full ecosystem to deliver bigger. Individual company can do a lot, but at some stage they are stuck with the scope 3 emissions, and it's only by working all together that we will be able to address and to deliver much bigger results. So indeed, SOS 1.5 has developed a roadmap, which is today a generic roadmap that we are going to work with you. We will adapt this roadmap by sectors. And basically, this roadmap is based on 5 steps. So wherever you are on your journey, you may start by step 2 or step 4 or step 5. But we are going to start with the step 1. And for each step, we have tried to identify with BCG the 3 main actions that needs to happen. And of course, this is still work in progress. So we will be testing that with you. We will be refining that with you. So the first one is, of course, on understanding climate risk and opportunity. It's really working on scenarios. What does it mean a world with 2 degrees? What does it mean a world with 1.5 degrees? What kind of a business can we have in this type of scenarios? How can we identify the opportunities and the issue related to these different scenarios? The second step is, of course, to set decarbonization target and milestone. Without having clear targets, then you cannot really move. So for that, you need to know your baseline. Where are your emissions? Where will be your future emissions? You need to set ambitions and targets, and they need to be science-based to make sure that indeed they will deliver against this Paris Agreement. And then you need to identify the size of the levers. What can you do? What can you implement? And how you can work with other people. Then you need to build climate programs that is embedded in your strategy. We have seen that all the companies that are best in class, that are really delivering on this decarbonization journey, are companies that have rethink their strategy and embedded the climate actions in every action that they do. Every department is delivering against this goal. So you need to look at your competitive advantage. You need to align your corporate strategy with the climate agenda. And you need to be very, indeed, consistent across all the departments of your organizations. Then we have the mobilizing resources internally and externally. So you need to make sure that at all levels in the company, people are engaged. You need to prioritize resources to deliver against this goal. And you need to mobilize your stakeholders and your customer and your clients to deliver with you these decarbonizations. And the last step is about communications. You need to engage and to disclose. You need to do it in a credible manner. You need to educate your customer. You need to communicate what you do in a way that people are going to trust, that your engagement and your results are indeed trustworthy. And then so you need to disclose reliable information. So these are the 5 steps with the 15 actions that we have identified that of course we will go further with you. And then we need to go beyond individual actions. Indeed, until now, we can say that a focus was on scope 1 and scope 2. And I will say that most of the company today are playing there, even if there's still a big amount of company that needs to deliver on scope 1 and 2. And then the scope 3 started to be integrated with the big difficulties to deliver and to understand what exactly needs to be included. And we will be working on that. But now we want to move to the next step, which is really a broad ecosystem mobilizations to scale up impact. And basically this is illustrated by the figure on the right, where classically we had this manufacturing linear approach, and now we want to include all the actors. If we look at the built environment, we want to include architects to also be accountable for the scope 3 emissions of this supply chain. So with that, the way that we want to support you, it's with a four kind of a work stream. The first one is indeed to shape the narrative. We need to make sure that we have a clear narrative on how we are going to address that, how we are going to raise awareness, how we are going to raise ambitions. And then there will be a big element on policy advocacy. Then there's a 3 work stream, one already presented by Maria and myself on accelerating individual journey. So we want to have all the members being able to share between themselves the best practices, what they have done, how they have overcome specific barriers. So this is really learning and implementing the best practice from others inside your company. Then there will be another one, which is mobilizing ecosystem. And we want to launch a 2 or 3 pathfinder on a specific value chain to try to find a way that all together we can deliver even bigger decarbonization results. And the last one is going to be about enriching global standard and metrics, because we have heard again and again from you that still today for reporting greenhouse gas emissions, there are issues. For complying with SBTi target is also, there are some issues. Protocols are not covering all sectors. So we need to improve that. And we need also to improve the disclosure and the accountability. So these 3 work streams are going to be the subject of the breakout sessions that we will have now, where we will ask you to comment and to provide additional feedback. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you to start your Meti with the code that you had before, and then start answering these questions about how you think that SOS 1.5 can help you to deliver these decarbonizations that we need. So let me activate this poll, and then I will give you 2 minutes before we move to the next sessions, as we are a little bit behind the timeline that we were planning. So we have now 4 respondents, so please try to connect, because it's very, very useful for us to take advantage of this webinar, having 99 people on the call to try to refine the priority on where we should put our resources to make sure that we provide the adequate support that you need, that we create the adequate platform so you can collaborate between each other. So that's interesting. We have 27 respondents, so let's still wait a little bit. So yeah, ecosystem is coming back, accelerating individual journey, of course, is there. So this is pretty much in line with what we heard. And as you vote, again, what we share today is quite a very short summary. And in the coming weeks, we will come back to you with a full report that we are preparing now with BCG. And then we will be starting specific webinar on each of these work streams. So let's give another maybe minute before we go. And what's going to happen now is that we will be split in 3 breakout sessions, but Michael will explain that. Okay, so I suggest that that's very interesting. So indeed, a lot of vote on the first one. So helping you to accelerate your journey to decarbonization. Second one, for now, it's ecosystem with equal with global standard. So I let you continue to vote while Michael is going to introduce the breakout sessions, and then you will be split automatically. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Erwan. If we can go to the next slide. So yes, just like Erwan mentioned, the next session is going to be in breakout. There are going to be 3 distinct breakout sessions based on the three work streams that Erwan already mentioned. So there's one going to be on accelerating individual climate journeys, the second one on mobilizing ecosystems, and the third one on enriching global standards and metrics. So what that will happen is we will be in these sessions for 15 minutes with a short introduction by a speaker that were introduced earlier in the sessions, followed by a short round of participant reactions and well, expression of needs on how SOS can support companies. So I would like to call on Peter, our technician, to begin sending us into the breakouts. Please allow us a minute or two to make sure that everyone is in a breakout and you have the right speakers to lead the session. So after the breakouts, we will all come back in plenary for the summary and next steps, which will be led by Erwan. So Peter, if you're on the line, could you please send us to the relevant breakout rooms? Thank you.
So are we back in plenary? I think so.
Yes, I believe the majority of the participants are now back in the plenary.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, we lost some of them because we were 99 when we started. Now we are 80. So where are the 10 missing? Okay, let's not joke. So let's move to the next and the final part of this session. So we will start with some meaty, and I will ask Michael to lead us to the 3 questions we are going to ask you.
Thank you very much, Erwan. I hope that everyone had, well, interesting discussions. I know for a fact that we did. We had some interesting insights from the speakers and as well as the participants on the call. So I hope those were very fruitful discussions for everyone. Just to sort of bring it all back together, we have a few questions to get some reaction and feedback from you. So again, if everyone could go to www.menti.com and use the code 4747 just to prep. We are going to go through 3 questions. And just to prep you, the first question will be, which of the decarbonization roadmap actions would you most welcome if you would like to join SOS 1.5? The second one will be to indicate the top 3 ecosystems that were presented early, and which ones should we provide priority on. And then the last one will be, which of the following actions would you most need help with? But Erwan, if we could go to the next slide and get people engaged on the question. Yes, so for the first question, for which decarbonization roadmap action would you most welcome support? So earlier on, Erwan took us through the decarbonization roadmap, which looks at first understanding your climate risks and opportunities. Secondly, which is around setting the targets and milestones and signaling that level of ambition in line with 1.5. And then the third one is around building the climate program, which is aligned with the strategy. And within my session, one of the key things that came out was, aligning the corporate strategy at different parts or within different parts of the organization. Interesting. Okay, now that the slide is active, we see it's moving. Mobilizing resources broadly to deliver impact seems to be a clear winner here. Building a climate program in line with company strategy, close second, which is now leading. Interesting. How many people do we have on the call? 77, and we have 29 people responding. So I encourage you to please, continue to log in and provide this feedback, because this is something that we will definitely utilize in the next steps and use to prioritize and advance the work moving forward. So thank you very much for the feedback. This is very useful for how we advance with the work on SOS 1.5. I guess when we get to 40, everyone, perhaps we can go to the next slide. So here we see that mobilizing resources broadly to deliver impact is still a clear winner. Close second is building a climate program in line with the corporate strategy. So we will swiftly move on to the next question. indicates the top 3 ecosystems where SOS 1.5 should provide support in order of priority. So Erwan, if you can activate the slide again. Seems to be, yeah, we now are seeing some trends with chemicals, carbon capture and storage still leading, circularity, circular economy principles. NCS is also being mentioned. The CCS seems to be a clear lead. Natural climate solutions is also slowly gaining recognition. Very interesting. I see. So I mean, for the top 3 so far, we can see carbon capture and storage. We have natural climate. Oh, but that changed very quickly. And natural climate solutions and circularity being the top 3 ecosystems that, well, should, you know, be prioritized or need SOS 1.5 to provide support on. I think, Erwan, we can go to the last question. And the last question is, which of the following actions would you most need help with? So far, nothing coming in yet. There we go. So developing sectoral SBT roadmaps, developing a common reporting matrix, a baseline scope 3 downstream is also a clear leader, an emerging one. Yeah, we see developing sectoral SBT roadmaps is one of the key ones. Developing a common reporting metric. So metrics for scope 3 targets is proving to be one of the leads. Yes, we have here developing SBT. Yeah, I think it's clear that we have the top 3 now are the baseline scope 3 for the downstream, developing sectoral SBT roadmaps, and also developing a common reporting metrics and standards. So with that, I will hand over back to Erwan for a quick summary and also information around the next steps and how to get engaged with SOS 1.5. Erwan, over to you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much, Michael. And I'm sorry because I can see that we are already 2 minutes over the time, and probably many of you needs to go. So I will go quickly. Indeed, I don't need to spend too much time on that because we have been discussing this 3 work stream a lot. So this is where we will come back to you and make sure that we initiate this activity, collecting your feedback and working all together to accelerate individual climate journey, to mobilize the ecosystem, and to enrich a global standard. So we are really looking forward for these next weeks and months and go to COP26 with something very concrete that we can show to the rest of the business and the world that we are now, we have everything in place to deliver big decarbonizations. So in terms of immediate next steps, as of May 15, we will share the SOS 1.5 report that will contain much more information that we share with you today. This report will be a living document in the sense that it will be used to, it will be enriched by all the work that we will do in this work stream. But on June 1, we will start the webinar with indeed these 3 work streams. And on June 5th, we want to launch the report executive summary at the World Environmental Day to make sure that indeed we are of a milestone that we can start with indeed something very concrete. And then something on the concluding remark to go fast. It's really SOS 1.5, as Maria has said right from the beginning, is here to help our members to fulfill the criteria #1 for this new membership criteria, which is to set ambitions to be net zero by 2050. So we are not just asking you to commit, but we want to help you to find the way to indeed get into this commitment by indeed using science-based targets, by disclosure your informations. So all the programs that we are doing in WBCSD are going to help you deliver on this target. So it's not only SOS 1.5 alone, but SOS 1.5 is going to establish the link with all the activity within WBCSD to make sure that all this activity, all this work program, all these projects are delivering in the same directions, helping you to deliver this net zero emissions by 2050. So we are 4 minutes late, so thank you very much for the 68 that have stayed until the end. We appreciate very much that you committed to this webinar. We are looking forward to working with you for the next week, next month, next year, and we will make it happen for sure. So thank you very much and enjoy your day.
Thank you, bye.
And yes, I forgot to mention that indeed everything will be on the website. You will be able to access all the informations.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.